Hi everyone! So I have some exciting news. For the first time in like 20 years, the Wayside School author made another book. I have to be honest, I couldn't wait to read it and I literally just finished it. It's super good. So I was hoping that you guys would like to listen to it. So I'm going to read a few chapters and post them in videos, and if you want to watch them, cool, and if you don't, you're missing out. It's really good. So we have 30 chapters as normal, and we have a note from the author. This is the fourth book about Wayside School. I wrote the first one, Sideways Stories from Wayside School, more than 40 years ago. I'm a lot older now, but in my heart, I'm still Louis, the yard teacher, passing out the playground balls and playing with the kids at recess. To fully enjoy this book, you should read the other 3 first, wait 40 years, and then read this one. Or you can just read it now. The Bells of Wayside. It's very important that the children at Wayside know the bell system. The first bell in the morning sounds like this. Whoop, 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 whoop. When they hear it, they know they have 16 minutes to get to class. That's not too difficult for those in Mr. Hargrove's class on the 3rd floor. But Wayside School is a 30-story building with 1 room on each floor. So for those who happen to be in Mrs. Jules's class way up on the 30th floor, they must be ready on the first whoop. Todd was in Mrs. Jules's class. He was stuck behind a mass of kids outside the building, waiting for the doors to open. He jumped up and down, trying to see over the heads of those in front of him. He was late. Mrs. Jules had put his name on the blackboard, under the word discipline. The kids who went to class on the lower floors often dilly-dallied. If Todd got stuck behind a large group of dilly-dalliers, he'd have no chance. Inside the principal's office, Mr. Kidswatter sat behind his enormous desk as he watched the clock. At the moment the second hand reached the number 12, he shrieked into his microphone, "Whoop, whoop, 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 whoop!" The doors unlocked and the children stampeded into the building and up the stairs. Todd tried his best to weave his way to the front, but there wasn't a lot of room. 8 minutes later, Mr. Kidswatter tugged on the rope hanging through the hole in the ceiling, and the second bell rang. Clang, 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 clang. Todd counted the clangs. 8. That meant he now had 8 minutes to get to class. 7 or 9 clangs would have meant something completely different. 7 meant a helicopter was landing on the roof, and 9 clangs meant a porcupine had entered the building. So far, he had only made it to the 7th floor, but he had finally managed to weave his way past all the dilly-dalliers. There was nothing to slow him down now. When he reached the 18th floor, he heard this sound. Ching-a-ling, ching-a-ling, ching-a-ling. Nothing to worry about there. That just meant that they were out of donuts in the teacher's lounge. The scary bell was the late bell. It didn't matter where he was. It always sounded like an angry driver was slamming on a car horn right behind him. It made Todd jump every time. He quickly dashed from the 18th to the 20th floor. There was no 19th floor. His legs were sore and he was breathing hard as he reached the top. Just ahead, he could see Joy entering the classroom. "Don't shut the—" Todd shouted. Joy shut the door behind her. "Goosack," said Todd. He was just opening it when the horn blared as if right behind him. "You're late, Todd," said Mrs. Jules as he entered the classroom. "Write your—" "I know," he said. He wrote his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Other bells rang throughout the day. At noon, the lunch bell kaboinged 3 times. 3 kaboinks meant macaroons and cheese. The bell for recess was just a single ding, but nobody ever missed it. At the end of each day, Mr. Kidswatter would bang a giant gong with a large iron mallet. It was his favorite thing about being principal. Todd sat at his desk, glumly looking at the blackboard. The day had started off badly for him and had only gotten worse. There was now a check mark next to his name under the word discipline. Next to that, Mrs. Jules kept adding new homework assignments. Read a book, write a book report, draw a picture. Don't forget your paperclip. History, read pages 55 through 59 and answer questions on pages 61 and 62. Math worksheet, do even and odd-numbered problems. Science, read pages 29 through 34 and do the experiment on page 37. Todd had a sick feeling in his stomach, and it wasn't just the mac and cheese. In big letters across the top of the blackboard, Mrs. Jules had written, "Ultimate test starts tomorrow." Mrs. Jules had been warning the class about the ultimate test all year. The test would last for 3 days. If he failed, Todd would be sent back to kindergarten. And then he heard it, the most magical bell of all. Ping, pong. This bell had only rung once in the history of Wayside School, and nobody knew who rang it, but everyone knew what it meant. All around, kids began cheering and clapping their hands. Shouts of joy could be heard coming from every floor of Wayside School. Todd just sat there in stunned belief. It rang again. Ping, pong. It was the erase the blackboard bell. Mrs. Jules had no choice. She picked up the eraser. Up and down Wayside School, teachers were doing the same thing. Todd smiled as the homework assignments were wiped away. The ultimate test was canceled. His name was removed from the discipline list, and even the word discipline soon disappeared. Deep in the basement, a man with a black mustache snapped open a black briefcase. Another man, also with a black mustache, placed a small silver ball into the case. A third man, who was bald, put in a solid gold ping-pong paddle. Chapter 2, A Million. By the time Terrence got to school, he had already kicked 99 different things. It started the moment he woke up. He kicked his bed. He kicked Rocky, his favorite stuffed animal. When he left his bedroom, he kicked the door shut. He kicked the wall as he sat at the kitchen counter and ate cereal. He kicked a table. He kicked 3 chairs. He kicked rocks on the way to school, and he kicked the flagpole. Still, as much as Terrence liked to kick things, it would take him his whole life to kick 1,000,000 things. "How much is 1,000,000? Mrs. Jules asked her class. Ooh, I know, said Mac, stretching his hand high. Mrs. Jules called on Mac. 1,000,000, Mac answered proudly. Well, yes, I suppose that's correct, said Mrs. Jules. 1,000,000 is 1,000,000. Anyone else? John? John lowered his hand. 999,999. He paused, then added, +1. He smiled. Oh, that's good, John, said Dana, very impressed. John's really smart, Joe agreed. Terrence wasn't paying attention. His big toe hurt from all that kicking. His toenail was too long. Sherry, who had been sleeping at her desk, suddenly awoke and said, 10 times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10. She rested her head on her red and blue overcoat and went back to sleep. Is that right, Mrs. Jules? Asked Jason. Said Mrs. Jules. She tried to multiply all of Sherry's tens. Well, if Sherry said it, it must be right. Arithmetic makes my brain numb, said Damien. That's why they're called numbers, said DJ. Terrence's big toe throbbed in pain. He couldn't think about anything else. There's really only one way to understand just how big 1,000,000 is, said Mrs. Jules, and it's not by using arithmetic. We need to collect 1,000,000 somethings. Dollars! Exclaimed Joy. Everyone cheered. They liked that idea. Then we could have the biggest party ever, said Dee Dee. We're not collecting $1,000,000, said Mrs. Jules. Any other ideas? Pumpkins? Suggested Dana. Everyone cheered Dana's idea too, but not as loudly as Joy's. I don't think 1,000,000 pumpkins would fit in the school, said Mrs. Jules. We need something small and not too expensive. Stephen suggested, little pieces of paper? Nobody cheered. Boring, sang Kathy. Stephen felt hurt, but deep down he had to admit that collecting bits of paper wouldn't have been a whole lot of fun. Ron suggested mud, but that too was rejected. It's a good idea, Ron, said Mrs. Jules, but you can't count mud. Why not? He asked. There's no such thing as 1 mud or 2 muds, explained Mrs. Jules. Why not? Ron asked again. I don't know, said Mrs. Jules. She had to admit that. Terrence couldn't take it any longer. He took off his shoe, then his sock. One desk over, Ronnie stared at him, horrified. Terrence's toenail was bent out of shape and it had turned black and blue. He opened his desk and took out his pair of safety scissors. Then, crossing one leg over the other, he started snipping. "You can't cut your toenails in class," said Rondi. "It's against the rules." "Who says?" said Terrence. It was one tough toenail and the scissors weren't all that sharp. "Mrs. Jules," called Rondi, "Terrence is cutting his toenail right in class." Some kids laughed. Some said gross. Terrence pushed hard on the scissors. At last, a piece of his toenail fell free. His toe instantly felt better. "Terrence, come up here now," demanded Mrs. Jules, "and bring your toenail with you." Terrence picked up the clipping off the floor. One shoe off, one shoe on, he hobbled to the front of the room. "Give me that," Mrs. Jules demanded. Terrence dropped the nail clipping into his teacher's outstretched hand. "You're a genius, Terrence," said Mrs. Jules. She held his nail clipping high in the air. "That's one. 999,999 to go," she announced. Chapter 3 will be next video, and it is called Up and Down. I hope you're enjoying it. Bye.